conversation. With that, we turn it over to Brian Entin in New York.
Hey everybody, I'm Brian Entin filling in for Chris Cuomo tonight. It was day 2 at Donald Trump's criminal hush money trial. His friend and former publisher of the National Enquirer was back on the stand for the prosecution. And could what he called a secret arrangement with the Trump campaign put the former president in serious jeopardy? We have got the best legal team in the business. They're going to break it all down for us in just a minute. And then also the case of the Arizona rancher accused of fatally shooting a migrant on his property. Well, there was a mistrial declared after just one juror wanted to find him guilty. So what went on in that jury room, and will George Allen Kelly be retried for shooting a migrant in the back? We've got his lawyer. She's going to join us live coming up on the show. Plus, protests, they continue tonight. Right now, they're causing chaos on college campuses. Columbia University has now canceled all of their in-person classes for the rest of the year in order to protect their students' safety. So is it okay for free speech to cause this kind of fear? We've got 2 of the most vocal professors on the protests. One is a Jewish Columbia professor who says his ID was deactivated when he tried to enter campus. And the other who says the protesters not only have a right to be there, but he also says that their demands should be met. So that's coming up. We're going to talk to both of them. And then a big exclusive in the case of the 2 murdered moms in Oklahoma. Tonight we have a state senator from Oklahoma who personally knows Grandma Tiffany and the other suspects. He's speaking out for the first time about what he knows about him, and why he is not surprised that Grandma Tiffany is behind bars. And then also Chris Cuomo launched a new episode of his podcast today. MMA star Ronda Rousey was on the podcast. We want to let you hear a little bit about what she told Chris about a relationship with Joe Rogan and why it is not what you might expect. You're definitely going to want to hear what Ronda had to say to Chris. That's coming up later in the show. But let's start with day 2 in Donald Trump's criminal hush money trial. Even before court was in session, Trump's attorneys had an explosive exchange before the judge with the prosecution in a hearing about the former president's gag order. Trump took to social media. He posted this on Truth Social. "My farewell message. I hope this isn't goodbye. If things don't go our way, I could be thrown in jail. If that happens, you need to know you are the reason." Then prosecution witness and former publisher of the National Enquirer, David Pecker, took the stand again to talk about a secret arrangement that he had with Trump and his attorney, Michael Cohen, to help Trump's 2016 campaign, what he called a special arrangement. That kept coming up. They called it a special arrangement. So how bad of a day was this for the defense? Let's bring in former federal prosecutor Renato Mariotti, high-profile defense attorney Mark Garagos, and New York trial attorney Misty Maris. We've also got Sean Spicer with us right now, NewsNation political contributor and Trump's former White House press secretary. Thank you all for joining us. I want to start with you, Misty. So now we've got David Pecker, the former publisher of the National Enquirer, trying to help Trump in the election. And that's a key point. They made that clear today. He was going to help him in the election. How significant is that?
It's really speaking to one of the defenses that we anticipate is going to come up. So Trump is going to argue that these hush money payments were for many other reasons: business reputation, his family. He wanted to silence these Stormy Daniels, Karen McDonough, and the doorman in this case because they were going to have information that would be embarrassing to him. So that's central because, remember, this is falsification of business documents to cover up or in furtherance of another crime. That crime, presumably campaign finance laws, that these payments should have been campaign donations or qualified as that. So the prosecution has to show that that crime was committed. This testimony speaks to the heart of that. Pecker testified that the reason that they had this meeting, Trump, Michael Cohen, and himself, was because of the election and to suppress stories that were negative for Trump and also to put out stories that were negative for his political opponents. So it speaks to the heart of one of Trump's defenses.
Mark, yesterday you said this could have gone back years in terms of Pecker helping Trump, that this agreement agreement may have gone back a long while. Maybe it was to keep things from Melania, who knows? But they were very clear today, Mark, that the agreement was made in 2015. And again, it was to help Trump in the 2016 election. So this doesn't seem like a good thing for Trump, Mark.
Not only that, but the other thing that Misty just mentioned that I think is even more problematic is the putting out stories that were negative on his competitors. That is something, if I'm the prosecution, I'm going to be hammering home, because that shows, look, you can embrace this idea, I didn't want Melania to know, I didn't want the family to know, but when you're doing hit pieces on your competitors at the very same time, that is, is his kryptonite here.
Yeah, it's a good point. And again, they're just trying to tie it all back to the election. I want to show you some of the headlines that you just mentioned. One of them was Donald Trump blasts Ted Cruz's dad for photo with JFK assassin. Bungling surgeon Ben Carson left sponge in patient's brain. Again, these are headlines that David Pecker came up with when he was publisher of the National Enquirer, all related back to the election. It seems like, Renato, this was sort of a slam dunk for the prosecution, sort of connecting that together, again, tying everything back to the election.
I agree. I mean, look, there's a reason why the prosecution's calling Mr. Pecker as a witness. There's a reason why they put him first on their list. They thought that not only is he going to help them, but he's going to be a very solid piece for them. You never, when you're a prosecutor, put your flippers, your more difficult witnesses, the Michael Cohens of the world, in the very beginning of your case. So I'm not surprised that they let off with somebody like him. And it is strong. You know, as Misty mentioned a moment ago, their focus is going to be on trying to connect this to an election election fraud crime, essentially the supposed conspiracy to defraud the election. That is what they're going for a felony. So I think that's going to be absolutely key. I think the most vital witnesses are going to be obviously in the middle of the case, the Michael Cohens of the world, some of those Trump Organization witnesses and so on.
The whole catch and kill aspect of this, Sean, it's so shady. And look, I get that politics are shady and celebrities are shady and they do all sorts of things behind the scenes. But is this unusual in the world of politics, Sean? Is this just a Trump thing, or do other politicians do this where they pay publishers to say they're going to take stories just so that they'll secretly kill them?
No, I mean, I've never heard anyone do that, but I also, again, let's be clear on what's going on here. I mean, Donald Trump denies that that's what happened, that these were payments to Michael Cohen, his attorney at the time. But if I can, I just want to take a step back, because something that Misty said was important here, that to take this from a bookkeeping misdemeanor that it was, and it occurred in 2015, 2-year statute of limitations, and what they call enhance it, you have to prove that it was in furtherance of another crime, which is what she said. Well, that other crime is seemingly campaign finance related, which is what the FEC, the Federal Election Commission, the Department of Justice, the Southern District of New York, and Alvin Bragg's predecessor in the office, Cy Vance, have all passed on and said there was nothing there. Think about it. These circumstances that we're talking about today occurred in 2015. It's 2024. All of the statute of limitations that would normally apply have well expired. If this wasn't Donald Trump, we wouldn't be even close to having this conversation right now.
Sean, this isn't like we're talking about a former president who committed treason here. I mean, this is the whole thing is about $130,000 that went to a porn star. Even the last, I was just telling Missy, the fact that the name of the last guy is Pecker, it's salacious. It's fun to talk about. But Sean, do you think voters really care? I mean, politically, does any of this really matter, or is it just make for like fun TV?
Well, I would say that I'm not sure that I agree with your definition of fun, but I think it's salacious TV. That being said, does it matter? And I think that the point that I would make with respect to this is twofold. One, tell me something you don't know about Donald Trump, and give me a break. I mean, I think the idea that anyone's looking at this news and saying, really, I didn't think anything like this could possibly happen with Donald Trump. You've been living under a rock for the last 10 years. So anyone whose, I think, mind is being made up by this was probably not going to vote for Trump in the first place. And secondly, there's so much baked in with Donald Trump as an individual. You think about, I was there on the 2016 campaign with the Access Hollywood tape, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and all the things that we went through 4 years of his presidency. The idea that this is the thing that's going to tip the scale is pretty much ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a good point. Mark, how do you think this is playing with the jury? Because obviously Sean's talking about politically tip the scales in terms of voters, but really it's just those jurors that are going to matter in terms of the trial. What do you think they're thinking right now?
You know, it's always tough to say. If you got a couple of these jurors who you believe were going to do what they're instructed to do. Remember, they're instructed not to make up their mind, not to talk about the case, literally all the way through until they get into the jury room. I often laugh when people say, well, jurors have made up their mind after opening statements. I say jurors have made up their mind as soon as you select them. I don't care who you are, the most persuasive orator of all time. You're not going to turn somebody and their life experiences around in a matter of weeks. So they come to this with a predetermined worldview. How does this play? Well, right now, obviously, the prosecution is up. But, you know, I don't want to make it seem like we're doing an ESPN game day analysis. The fact is that you're supposed to wait as the evidence unfolds. You'll see cross-examinations. You'll see the prosecution's going to have some really bad days. And I will tell you, if the defense is able to score points in the prosecution's case in chief, as my father used to say, it's a rare case that gets better for the prosecution after they rest. So the idea here is do your damage, do it now in the prosecution case in chief, and let's wait and see if the jurors are receptive to that.
Misty, another big part of the day, in addition to David Pecker's testimony, was the start of today where they had this gag order conference, and the judge was not happy with Trump's attorneys. I mean, it got pretty heated, and basically they're not happy that Trump continues to go out on Truth Social, say things about witnesses, and he didn't make a decision whether he's going to punish Trump, but he didn't seem happy. No. How do you think that's going to play out?
Well, Brian, I think the defense attorney, they were advocating the way that they need to advocate, of course, advocating for their client. But the judge said, you're losing credibility with your arguments. Sometimes there's facts and you have to deal with them. So I do think the judge made a limited gag order, meaning that everything is not off limits, but specifically jurors and witnesses are off limits in what he puts out there in the public sphere. So to the extent that those 10 issues that the prosecution raised relate to jurors and witnesses, I do think we're going to see a punishment. It's likely to be financial and an admonishment. It's not going to be more than that at this point. But the judge wants to keep control of the courtroom, keep control outside of the courtroom to that extent. Yeah. So I think we're going to see a decision on that will have some consequence.
And Renato, the consequence that we're told is $1,000 per violation of the gag order. Could eventually lead to jail time. But I'm just thinking, I mean, Trump's, wanting to play politics here. $1,000 to him is very, very little. Do you think he'll just continue to speak out and say, almost screw it, I'll just pay the money?
Absolutely. And I think that's been his playbook thus far. I mean, he really tried in the New York Attorney General case, the civil case, to turn that into a circus. I mean, he was, attacking the judge, attacking the judge's staff, trying to goad the judge really into doing something that would turn it into more of a circus than it really was. That is really, what Trump was trying to do, really to distract from the evidence and the findings in that case. I think he's going to do the same thing here. He does not want people talking about a hush money scheme or false statements in business records. He wants to turn this into a circus, turn it into a war. You had put up a moment ago a fundraising, pitch that he was making, effectively saying, I'm fighting for you. I'm doing this for you. In other words, I'm attacking the judge and I'm disobeying his orders for you in some way. So I think it's just part of a political or press or PR. It certainly isn't part of a political strategy.
Yeah, Brian, can I just make one quick point?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Sean.
The word attacking the judge and the witnesses keeps getting thrown around. Let's be clear. I think there's a fine line between attacking and pointing out the facts. Calling Michael Cohen a liar, an individual who was found guilty of perjury, which is what lying is fact-based, not attacking the witness. Referring to pointing out the fact that the judge's daughter makes millions of dollars for clients who have a vested interest in seeing Trump found guilty because Adam Schiff and other Democratic clients of hers literally are raising money on the backs of this is a fact. Pointing that out isn't attacking her. It's a fact. I mean, and then making the point, hold on, lastly, making the point that the judge actually made contribution to Democrats is not attacking. It's pointing out facts.
Go ahead, Renato. I mean, Michael Cohen is a liar. He's right, Renato.
Convicted liar.
Yeah.
But here's another fact is when you're disobeying the judge's orders And when you're taking pot shots at the judge in the middle of a trial, it's not a legal strategy. Okay, I've tried a lot of cases. I handle a lot of cases across the country. It's common sense that that's not a legal strategy. There's no legal strategy here. It is purely a press or PR or political strategy. That's what that is. And it's not going to help you in the four corners of that court.
That's the difference between Renato and me. Sometimes you got to have a legal strategy that involves pushing back on judges who overstep. And frankly, I will tell you that I find it offensive as a defense lawyer. Mind you, I'm no Trump fan, but I've found it, and I've argued, Brian, I've talked to you about it. I think this idea that somehow we let the prosecution beat the hell out of a defendant, go leading up to the trial, and then we want to gag the defense. You know, the whole idea of Shepard versus Maxwell, which is the U.S. Supreme Court decision in this area, was to protect the defense. It wasn't to muzzle the defense, and somehow that's been perverted over the last 60 years. So I think, frankly, this idea of a gag order is really kind of silly. If you want to do something, sequester the jury.
And in the middle of a presidential campaign, too. I mean, you're telling him he can't speak out when he's trying to run for president. Yeah. Misty's making eyes at me. She's making a lot of hand movements.
And I actually agree with Mark wholeheartedly. I'm a defense lawyer as well. But this particular gag order is limited. He actually can talk about the judge. He actually can talk about the DA. It's only certain areas that are out of bounds. And I agree with the issue of Michael Cohen, but there is something about preserving witnesses, making sure that they don't feel intimidated, and especially the jury. We know a lot of them had anxiety going into the courtroom. We want to make sure that they can make a fair and impartial decision and aren't part of anything that's going on.
Yeah, I do feel for the jurors. And this is only day 2. We got to go for 6 weeks, so it's going to be a wild ride. Sean Spicer, Renato Mariotti, Misty Maris, Mark Aragos, thank you all for coming on. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, this break now, it's 4 minutes, 5 seconds, still a lot to come. Next we've got the mistrial that was declared in the case of the Arizona rancher accused of fatally shooting a migrant who walked onto his property. 1 juror out of 8 wanted to find him guilty, while all the rest wanted to acquit. The question now, will they try George Allen Kelly again? And will a jury of his peers ever find him unanimously guilty of murder? We've got his lawyer. She's going to join us live next.
It is what it is, and it will be what it will be. Let me go home, okay? All right, we're on. It is what it is, and it will be what it will be. I will keep fighting forever. I won't stop.
5-year-old rancher George Allen Kelly, who was charged with second-degree murder in the shooting death of migrant Gabriel Cuen-Butamia in January of 2023 when he crossed onto his property near the border. Well, that has ended in a mistrial. Prosecutors said Kelly shot his AK-47 9 times at migrants who trespassed onto his 170-acre cattle ranch. Kelly claims he shot in the air over their heads to scare them off, but that he never aimed to shoot anyone. 9 bullet casings were found on his porch. But this is interesting. The bullet that killed the man was never actually found. The trial lasted 4 weeks, and jurors deliberated for 3 days. And according to the defense, 7 out of 8 jurors wanted to vote not guilty. So the question now, will Kelly be tried again, and can he actually get a fair trial? Joining me is George Allen Kelly's attorney, Kathy Lothorpe. She joins us live. Kathy, thank you for being with us. This was a close call. I mean, you really almost won. 7 not guilty, 1 guilty. You actually wanted them to go back and continue deliberating. Why were you so confident that it was going to go your way, Kathy?
Because I believe the trial went my way throughout the whole thing. I believe I showed that the state had no evidence. And therefore, I was confident that I would get a not guilty through the trial if the jurors did what they were supposed to do. So when they were hung, I still believe that I had more in my court than for guilt. And so therefore, I wanted them to go back and see if they could convince the holdouts.
Where do things go from here? I understand that there's going to be a hearing on Monday. Will the prosecution retry the case? Do you think they'll just let things go?
The state said they would have a decision on Monday. The judge said a status conference hearing at 1:30 in Arizona time, and we're hoping that she will follow through and let us know if she's going ahead and pursuing it to a second trial or if she is dismissing.
Do you have any feeling about it, Kathy? Are you getting any indication one way or the other what they'll want to do?
Unfortunately, the logic is not there on their side, but if I was them, I would dismiss. There is really very little hope that they will be productive in the second trial.
If there was a new trial, first of all, do you think that they could try for a change of venue? And then also, what if they come to you and say, we will not have another trial, but you have to agree to some kind of plea deal? Would you ever consider that?
I don't think George Allen Kelly will take anything because he is an innocent man. I think he's made it clear in the past. I haven't asked him since we got our hung jury if he would consider it, but I don't think that he would go for that.
What about change of venue? Do you think that could come into play?
These hearings, including the trial, have been, live fed throughout the whole state. Everyone knows about it. So I'm not really sure that would benefit in any way.
How's he doing? How's George doing? I mean, I know this has been an emotional roller coaster for him. We've been covering it all along the way, but was he relieved? What is he nervous they're going to try it again? Where's his mind at?
Well, he's already asked both counsel, myself, and Brenna Larkin to retry it if it gets to that point. We both agreed we would.
Okay.
And I think he's in good spirits about it because he also knows that there were more not guilties than guilt. And so I think he still feels comfortable. A month-long trial does wear you out, and I think he's ready to move on with his life and get out of there.
All right, we'll see how it plays out on Monday. Kathy Lothorpe, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, I want to bring in jury consultant Susan Constantine now and also defense attorney Mark O'Mara to sort of dissect what happened here. Susan, I want to start with you. 7 not guilty. There was 1 holdout. What goes on? I mean, you've been in these jury rooms. What goes on the inside in a situation like that?
Well, the holdout juror obviously has very strong opinions about the guilt or innocence, right? So that person was holding out their verdict. All of the other ones were voting not guilty. So there, from my understanding that there was a big scuttlebutt that was going on behind the scenes. And what I have seen in some of the mock trials that I've done prior to actually a jury trial, that when you test these arguments beforehand and you see where there's this disparity and you've got a holdout juror, there's a lot of anger and frustration that goes on behind the scenes. So at this point, when I'm looking at this case, when you're seeing 7-1, there's such a high majority of those that are pro-defense. To be able to have another trial, to have a retrial on this case, they better change up their strategy because it doesn't look good for the state at this point.
What do you think, Mark? How do you think the prosecution will which way do you think they'll go on Monday? You think they're going to want to go back to trial on this?
7-1 is a very strong statement from that jury that they did not prove their case. Again, this is not a question of whether or not Kelly is innocent. This is always a question of whether or not the state has proven their case beyond a reasonable doubt to each and every one of the jurors. 7 out of 8, if that's accurate, and I'm presuming it is quite a dictate to the prosecution that they don't have a strong case. Can they retry it because of ego and because of the shooting and because of sort of the way we are now starting to hold people responsible for their actions maybe more than 10 or 15 years ago? They could, but they better, as Susan said, change up their game a little bit because 7 jurors over 3 days said, you did not convince me.
Susan, what would they do? I mean, if they decide to retry it, I mean, they could change their strategy in the courtroom. But what about with picking the jury? I mean, it seems like they would really have to change things up there. What could they do differently?
Well, and Mark knows this as well as I do. It's a crapshoot that day. So it just depends on who's summoned, who's showing up. It's not like you get to pick a jury. It's about deselecting jurors, trying to identify those dangerous ones that are going to be a problem for the defense. And then you're trying to get rid of and use your preemptories for those particular jurors. So it's really like a chess match. So there, when you walk in, they're to change the strategy, number one, Test those arguments before you do that, and see how when you use an opinion stream, you could do social media mining to figure out what potential jurors might vote based on a new strategy, and test those arguments. Don't go in there just empty-handed. Figure out the stuff. Pretrial intelligence is massively important in a high-profile case like this.
But Mark, isn't it also just the area? I mean, these are border towns. They're overrun with migrants right now. I think people sympathized with George in this situation.
That's exactly what I was just going to say, Brian. And the truth is, in the southwest of this country, there's a groundswell against immigrants. And this is where he is going to be having his jury picked from. They're not going to be able to do a change of venue. We can pick jurors almost anywhere with enough ability to talk to them about pretrial publicity. But look, there is a groundswell, and I think that this verdict was impacted by that very groundswell that we had against migrants in this country, and it's going to happen with the next jury as well.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Monday is going to be the big decision. Susan Constantine, Mark O'Mara, thank you both for coming on. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, this break right now, 4 minutes, 30 seconds. Up next, campus protests. They are reaching a fever pitch. All classes are now remote until the end of the school year at Columbia University. No classes on campus. The dissent is spreading to colleges across the country. We have two vocal professors on very different sides of the conflict. One who is a Jewish professor from Columbia and says he wasn't even allowed onto his own campus. He'll join us live next.
Not just a civil right as a Jewish person to be on campus. I have a right as a professor employed by the university to be on campus.
Concerns. This has some parents very, very angry. They are even demanding a refund of their tuition, and many are calling for the school's president to resign. But while the students are breaking the school's rules, a Jewish Columbia professor, Shai Davidai, was denied access onto his own campus yesterday. The moment his ID card was deactivated, it was all caught on camera. It's now going viral. Take a look.
Can you back up, please? My card has been deactivated? Why? Can you back up, please? Wait. Everybody, my card has been deactivated. I am a professor here. I have every right to be everywhere on campus. You cannot let people that support Hamas on campus and me, a professor, not go on campus. Let me in now. I have not just a civil right as a Jewish person to be on campus. I have a right as a professor employed by the university to be on campus.
Wow. So here with me now is that Columbia professor, Shai Davidai. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate it, Professor. First of all, I mean, it's disturbing to see that happen. Has anything changed? Were you able to get on campus today?
Thank you. Honestly, before we start, I understand that the next person to speak is Professor Mark Lamont-Hill. I want your audience to know who that person is. This is a person who has shared articles by Louis Farrakhan calling Jews satanic Jews. This is a person who has fundraised for Ali Jida, a PFLP terrorist, and I'm reading this, a PFLP terrorist who spent 17 years in Israeli prison after blasts from 4 grenades he planted in downtown Jerusalem injured 9 civilians. So this is the other side. When people talk about what is happening on U.S. campuses, this is what's happening. Me, who believes in coexistence and just wants to be wherever I want on campus because that is my right, and the other side, the pro-Hamas professors who aren't just calling Jews satanic Jews, but are actually materially supporting terrorists. This is exactly the story of America and U.S. colleges.
Were you able to get back on the campus, though? I mean, are they actually not allowing you on the Columbia campus?
My card has been deactivated. They are not allowing me to go on campus because they say that they cannot physically protect me. You have right now outside of Columbia's campus NYPD waiting to go in. They have said that they are willing and able to go in because we have an illegal encampment of Hamas terrorists for the past 7 days, Hamas terrorists and their supporters, and the only person who's not letting them in is President Minu Shafiq, who on a recent video that just came out that was discovered, she said weeks after 9/11 that terrorism is a justified form of protest. She sees 9/11 as something that can be a justified form of protest. She sees October 7th as a justified form of protest, and she sees an illegal encampment that has had all the Jewish students flee from campus as a justified form of response.
One thing I don't understand, Professor, is this is private property, and I was out there yesterday. And obviously the protesters out on the street, and they've got the pens for them. But on the Columbia campus, you mentioned the encampment. I mean, there are hundreds of tents, and people have set up shop right there on private property, and it's now forcing them to shut down the campus. They had to cancel classes. How is this happening? I mean, regardless of what side of the issue that you're on, why is the university allowing this encampment to continue?
Because they are afraid. They are afraid. For 6 months, I've been documenting everything, and I call everyone to go on my social media, my Twitter. It's Shai Davidai. That's the tag. That's my handle. I've been documenting everything. Don't believe me. Go watch. Go watch the videos of them calling death to the Zionist state. Go watch them, pounding and breaking the door of the libraries, Low Library. Go and watch everything. She is beheld to pro-Hamas professors and radical organizers. Some of them have been suspended for 3 weeks and are still there. I want to read you a comment that just came out today by President Shafiq. It says that President Minouche Shafiq is concerned about, and I quote, the safety of the encampment, which continues to grow. She forgets to say it's an illegal encampment. She also says that university officials met with representatives of the student protesters until 2 a.m. this morning. President Shafiq is not speaking with me, is not speaking with the Jewish leaders, is not speaking with the Jewish students who've had to flee. She is speaking with the terrorists who are calling on Hamas to attack Jewish students. She is not doing her job. The trustees, Claire Shipman and David Greenwald, who are running the trustees, are not doing their job. They are siding with terrorism. It's a very simple story. I cannot believe I have to say this.
Well, listen, I feel for the Jewish students. I mean, again, I was out there yesterday. No one should feel like that they can't go to class and that someone's going to hurt them. And clearly there's been chants and anti-Semitic behavior. But when you say that they all side with Hamas terrorists, I mean, I don't think that that's entirely true. There are a lot of peaceful protesters out there.
Why do you think it's not true? Have you watched the 6 months that we have been recording? I am not talking about the brainwashed mob. Have you watched the brainwashing? Have you watched the segment where they do not allow the protester to speak with the media because they have a media team? Why do you think that this is not something that is widespread? Do you think that every Nazi that Zig Heil believed that Jews should be murdered? Of course not. But the organizers did. The administrations of the University of Berlin allowed them to do that. Do we need to see everyone shooting Jews in order to believe that everyone supports terrorism? Look at the videos. Look at what they are saying. Take them seriously.
Yeah, it is disturbing, and again, even the parents who are now saying, like, what are we paying tuition for if they're just going to shut the campus down? Again, this is private property; they're breaking the rules. How does this play out, Professor? I mean, are they going to let NYPD in eventually? They can't just keep the campus closed indefinitely.
They should have let the NYPD in a week ago. President Minouche Shafiq is taking hostage Columbia University. That is what's happening. She and Cass Holloway, her COO, they are clocking the gates. They are locking me, the most vocal supporter of the Jewish community on the university and probably in U.S. campuses in general. They are locking me out. They are locking the NYPD out, and they are letting the Hamas supporters in. The only thing I wanted to do on campus is to read the names of the 133 hostages that are being held by Hamas terrorists in Gaza, including 3 U.S. hostages, 3 American citizens that are being held by Hamas terrorists in Gaza. And instead of letting me do that, she's letting the people that are cheering on the Hamas terrorists to stay on campus and barring me out. So we stood outside of campus and we called all of the names, the Jewish and the Christian and the Muslim hostages that are being held.
Yeah.
But in being held by hostages. So good luck speaking with pro-Hamas, anti-Semitic supporter Professor Mark Lemon-Hill. I am ashamed that you bring
Professor,
me to
we wanted to have you on. We wanted to have you on together so that you could, talk about this. I mean, you have to talk about things to sometimes find a solution.
Would you have? No, I'm sorry. Would you have had an African American professor speak with David Duke? Would you have had an LGBTQ professor
we've got to
speak with someone who believes that gays should be killed?
I understand your point,
this is
Professor.
unacceptable.
I understand your point. We're going to have him on, though, at least to respond to some of the allegations that you've made.
Good. Good luck. This is a stain on your. This is a stain on your. This is a stain on you, not on me. Good luck.
I appreciate you coming on.
Chag Sameach.
I appreciate you coming on, sir. We're going to go to break real quick. We'll be right back after this. We had on Jewish professor Shai Davidai. He made some explosive allegations about our next guest and also the protests at Columbia University. Here to respond is Professor Mark Lamont Hill. He actually just got back from Columbia's campus. We wanted to have the professor on with you, Mark, but he did not want to have the segment with both of you together. That's why you were separated. But, I mean, regardless of how you feel about Israel or what's happening in Gaza, I was out there yesterday. You were just out there. How is it acceptable to shut down a college campus in America and for Jewish students to feel so unsafe that they don't even want to attend their classes? Many of them are going home. I mean, how is that okay, Mark?
Yeah, before I answer that, I want to respond to the smear that was made against me at the beginning of the last segment.
Okay.
The first thing that was said was that I have spread emails or posts on the social media referring to Jewish people as satanic, I believe he said. I've never done that. There's no evidence of me having done that. I've never even been accused of having done that. So I'm not sure where that's coming from. But to be clear, any post, any argument, any claim that Jewish people are satanic or any other anti-Semitic slur, anti-Semitic trope, anti-Semitic narrative is disgusting, it's disturbing, and it is wholly unacceptable. And I would fight with every ounce of my being against anyone who supported anti-Semitism. So no, I've never done that. And to the second claim, I did fundraise for Ali Jeddah. Ali Jeddah did spend 17. He didn't drop 9 grenades. Again, that's just false information. But Ali Jeddah did participate in acts in 1968 that caused him to be arrested for 17 years or incarcerated for 17 years. Since he got out in 1985, he has devoted his life to peace. He has devoted his life to coalition building. He's a tour guide in East Jerusalem, and he has done everything he can to bring an end to the conflict through nonviolent means. And the reason I support him is because he is a tour guide in Jerusalem who lost his ability to walk on one of his legs, and so I'm helping for the purpose of peace. So I just want to put that out there.
I'm glad you got to respond. But again, back to the protests. Regardless of how you feel, why is it okay to shut down an American institution and for the Jewish kids to be scared in America? I mean, they're clearly intimidated.
I don't accept that frame. And you're asking me, why is it okay for Jewish people to be scared, which would presume to the viewer that I have said that it is, and you just want me to explain why I feel that way. I've never said that.
No, but you support the protest, don't you? You think they should continue on the campus?
I support protest. That doesn't mean that I support that Jewish people should be afraid. Just like you support tough questions. But if I feel offended right now by your question, which I don't, I wouldn't say, well, why are you okay with me being offended? That's not your point. You have an objective, and I may read it differently. I support the right to free speech. I support the right to protest. I support the right for all students to protest. We should never live in a campus environment where Jewish students or any other students feel unsafe. I completely agree that that's a problem, if that is indeed the case. That has not been, based on my time talking to students. I've been on the campus. I just left the campus. I was at the protests. I witnessed all of this. Much of what I have seen today has been peaceful. In fact, all of what I've seen today has been peaceful protests. What I've seen earlier in the week, based on the video footage I've seen and talking to students in the protests, is that there were people who were antagonizing students. There were people who were I'm talking about pro-Palestinian students, a difficult time. Does that mean that Jewish students were never harassed? Am I making that claim? No, of course not. I'm sure some students did something wrong. That's in every protest. That's in every situation. And those students should be held accountable for that. No Jewish student should be made to feel unsafe. But I will not accept the narrative that that's the dominant, or even that it comprises even a small part of what these protests are about. And I also disagree with the claim that was made in the last segment that these are pro-Hamas protests. This idea that we're just going to conflate everybody who's pro-Palestinian with pro-Hamas, pro-terrorism, pro-violence. is despicable. And that's what he did almost without any critical pushback. The fact of the matter is, almost to a person, the people who are there in those protests are calling for justice. They're calling for peace. They're calling for a ceasefire. They are not calling for violence.
Yeah.
They are not calling.
And I was out there when I was out there. Most of the people, almost all the people, were peaceful and not hurting anyone. But there's also been video of folks holding up signs with terrorists on them and anti-Semitic chants that I don't even want to repeat. I mean, should this be allowed to continue on the campus, Mark? Why should
terrorists on what terrorists? I don't know what you're talking about.
Why should they be allowed to?
I'm asking a question. What terrorists? I can't answer the question if I don't understand.
Wali Daka, Qadir Adna. They were there. There's pictures of them. I mean, why should they be allowed to occupy the campus like that, intense? I mean, it's private property. If they want to go out in the protest zone, fine. But why should this be allowed to continue right in the, I mean, they've set up their own little city. They have their own little constitution. How is that okay?
Okay, again, you've conflated two things. If one were to hear what you just said, they would think that there's a group of students who have camped out all promoting signs of terrorism. I asked you who, because in the examples you gave, again, based on what I've seen on all the footage, and I've watched the footage pretty carefully, and I think you have too, there were a few students doing what you've described, and the overwhelming majority are not doing what you described. So
but them camping out in the middle of the campus is intimidating to a large population of the students at Columbia. It is. So much that classes are canceled, Mark. They had to cancel classes. That's just a fact.
So, yeah, it's a fact that classes were canceled. It is not a fact that people have I have not seen any evidence of the fact that the majority, even a large portion of students, are intimidated by the encampment. I haven't heard that, and I'm not sure what you're basing that on. But what I do know is that student protest, I think, is a legitimate form of resistance, and I'm okay with it. The only thing I'm not okay with are forms of resistance or forms of protest that cause harm, violence, intimidation, etc. That said, if someone says, hey, you saying river to the sea or you saying free Palestine makes me feel uncomfortable or unsafe, we may not agree on that, but that doesn't mean that every time you have a disagreement with me, that then I have to leave the campus. And just let's be very clear, and it's the last thing I'll say because I know we have to go. The professor who was just on, he mentioned these non-existent claims about me. He has 50 complaints of harassment against him by Columbia University students, targeting brown students, black students, Muslim students. No one mentioned that in his segment. But
well, I think again, we would have preferred to have you on together, Mark. And I know you.
No.
I know you agreed to that, though. You would have been able.
I'm talking about you as the reporter pointing out that part of why he's banned from campus is because he has a documented history of harassing students. And the reason why his ID card didn't work was because he was planning a counter protest in the middle of the encampment, which is called incitement. And yet no one seemed to mention that in the interview with him. So I'm just saying, yeah, I would have loved to have had a dialogue with him because I actually appreciate dialogue with people with whom I disagree, and I love having dialogue with my Jewish brothers.
Yeah, well, that's why I would have preferred to have you guys together, okay, obviously. But Mark Lamont Hill, we do appreciate you coming on. Thank you so much. Okay, we'll be right back after this.